Welcome to The Tripod, the official podcast of San Clemente High School. I'm your host, Jay Bish.
I think it's just important to accept it and normalize it and make people feel safe and not stand out.
Because when you're taught for, the 15 years before high school of like, this is how it is, this is, male and female, like this is just how the world is in every single way. I think when you get, confronted with, the truth that there's other things, that there's other identities and stuff like that, there is just a block against it because you're like, no, because I've been taught this way for 15 years.
Kinsey Sattel and Lorenzo Marino join me to discuss language, gender, culture, and identity on this episode of The Tripod. Lorenzo, when I first met you, you were a junior in drama, acting for the Jax films. Now, I think you've gone on this really cool adventure and experience in terms of identity. Can you start by just kind of walking me through when you initially had a moment of pause and thought about your identity? Like what was going through you that was making you think about how you identified?
It's hard. I can't pick one moment. Mm-hmm. I think it was just a lot of for a very long time, I just couldn't stop comparing myself to people. And so I just started to think about why I did that so much. And I guess it was just not feeling happy with who I was because I didn't feel like I was being honest. So I don't think it was one moment. I just think it was a lot of, feeling less than other people until I was able to think about who I was and why I compared myself to other people. And I think that just happened naturally, I guess, and especially during quarantine, reflecting on everything.
Why were you feeling less than?
I think when I saw people that just seemed more open with who they were, and I felt like I wasn't. Yeah.
And so how does that work in terms of a process? How do you go about unpacking your identity to make sure that you can be more authentic? Is that the right word?
Yeah. I just kind of thought about what I liked in terms of clothes and music and style with everything, and just thinking about all of that until I wasn't thinking about what other people thought of me as or how I was being perceived. Just trying to be just wearing things and listening to music and stuff that helped me feel more me.
How about you, Kinsey? Was it a similar road? Because I know when you were both in my class, you were both, I feel on similar journeys towards identifying in the way that felt most true to you. Mm-hmm. How did yours begin?
Yeah, so I remember me and Lorenzo would talk about it all the time. Just I would always say oh, I feel she, her identifying as a woman is so constricting for me and it doesn't feel right. And then I started thinking, well, maybe I could be non-binary and say they, them are my pronouns, but that also felt extremely restricting because I felt like it was more than that. It was more than just oh, I'm this way, I'm this way, I'm this way. It's hard to put a label on it because I don't really feel like my identity can be labeled. And so I felt in group settings, especially, it was if there was a ton of masculine people, I would be okay, I fit in here. And then immediately if someone would call me out and be oh, there's that girl in the room, it's a girl, she's a girl, I would get extremely self-conscious and notice that I was feeling sort of this feeling of gender dysphoria with it because in that moment I was specifically called out for something that I didn't felt like I identified with. And so that's during the quarantine especially, and especially with the new people that I've met and surrounded myself with, it's been a lot easier to just fully say like, yeah, I'm just genderqueer. There's no labels here. Anything is fine. And people are so receptive to it, and it's helped so much in like finding out what I personally like and dislike, and I've been more able to set those boundaries with people and be more open about it.
That's awesome. When you were traveling through and trying to figure out pronouns and such, what was it about some that were feeling restrictive in that process?
Well, I felt like sort of like I wasn't like female. I didn't feel like I was like identifying with that woman aspect of myself, but I also wasn't feeling like I was nothing. Like it was just like it was no gender, or I didn't like want to go with the binary. It was sort of just like I feel like I'm everything all at once. And I sort of wanted to find something that fit that niche, you know?
That's really cool. So in the last year or so for both of you, because we haven't talked like this, yeah, since basically since lockdown and all
Yeah.
that. What have you been going through in your personal journeys as you've kind of tried to figure out that label or lack thereof?
You want to go, Lorenzo?
Sure. Yeah, I think spending a lot of time alone has helped with that, and just a lot of writing about like feelings, and just I think not cutting myself off willingly, but just not being around, places like school, like Kinsey was talking about, like being in groups that are gendered or being perceived in certain ways. I think like that helped me with like not comparing myself to other people, not judging, not feeling like I'm being judged all the time, and wearing like different clothes, more feminine clothes that I could just wear and feel safe, not like, going out in public wearing clothes that might attract the wrong kind of attention that I might get. I wouldn't feel safe wearing in public because of, certain people's attitudes. So I think it allowed me a lot more freedom to just focus on myself without like outside voices, for me at least.
Has leaving high school helped in that regard too, like in terms of comfortability?
100%, yeah.
Can you expand on
Yeah.
that for me?
Kinsey?
Well, for me, it's just like high school was always like, and middle school too. Um, it was always something that I felt like was restricting me the entire time. In middle school, a lot of it was like dress codes. That was like a main thing that was like, I can't be who I want. I can't dress who I want. Cause I'm just a very anxious person by nature. So like something like that would like immediately stop me from wanting to like express myself fully, is being like called out specifically or having a lot of attention on me. I don't like. I just wear certain things or do certain things because they make me happy, they make me comfortable and feel like good within myself. And in high school specifically, I think people are extremely judgmental in high school. Um, People are automatically going to gravitate towards certain groups depending on how they act or what they dress like, and people automatically assign you with a label, no matter what you do. Um, so it's something like that where it can feel really restricting the whole time. And once you sort of leave that environment and like surround yourself with people that you actually want to be around, and you're not like forced to be in class with certain people or forced to be around certain people, it can really help you like want to show people who you are because they're so accepting of it.
Yeah. And I think that's a big aspect of it, like, being forced to be there. I just feel like it's not like going to a club or something, or even like college where everyone does want to be there a little more than high school. Now I feel, yeah, there's something about high school that just feels negative overall. It's hard to describe, but I definitely agree.
I was gonna say, can you try to tap into that a little bit? Like, is it just restrictions in terms of rules you have to follow? Like Kinsey, you were mentioning earlier about like you can't dress a certain way or whatever else. Like, is it those types of restrictions that bring it in? Is it student body related? Is it like, can you try to?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is being around, like especially in classes where a lot of the time you don't necessarily choose to take these classes. You know, there's requirements, you need to graduate. You have to take certain classes in order to graduate. So I think being around many different types of people that you wouldn't normally connect with, or don't have similar like worldviews or personalities, it's great to surround yourself with that. It's great to be open-minded and absorb all new perspectives, but especially in high school, since everyone is learning what they believe in and learning like sort of about themselves, it's sort of difficult to always um, be in there with such a huge crowd of people because you're surrounding yourself with people you aren't necessarily comfortable around. And it's sort of something that you can't choose. And I think that's really difficult to want to put yourself out there because in high school, like judgment is probably everyone's number one fear. You know, feeling like they belong, feeling like they fit in is so important to people in high school. Um, and with such like a smaller amount of people, I guess you could say, like especially in certain classes, there's only certain types of people that you can really group onto or attach yourself with. But in college, you know, there's so many different clubs, different majors, different types of people, um, who are all like accepting of those of anything that you could, you know, go with in yourself. Like if you identify a certain way or you dress a certain way, people are more receptive to it because they know that they're choosing their own path and you're choosing your own path. It's this choice thing that you have. With high school, it's you don't have a choice a lot of the time with classes you take. You know, it's like it's either like AP or you just go on like a regular route. So it's like those two choices aren't necessarily a wide range, you know, and everyone in every class is so different. So it's hard to sort of attach yourself to certain people or find a place where you feel safe enough to express yourself.
Would you say? Oh, sorry. Go Lorenzo.
Oh, I was gonna say like San Clemente specifically, which I don't like. There's a lot of great stuff in like Orange County in Southern California, but I think there is like hearing slurs and stuff like in classes is another detriment where people are so open with their like beliefs against like who I am and who like many people are, and I know that I'm going to see this person like every single day in this class, so I'm not going to want to be who I am because I know like that person in that group, I will like be in the same room as them every day and I won't be able to focus on school because I'll be so concerned with like how they're judging me, which you don't want to. It's easy to say just let that go and not let people bother you, but it does have an effect on you, whether you're hiding it or being open and then scared of how people will react.
Where do you think that comes from in people? Because I mean, I'll agree with you. Like, I think it's definitely an issue that we have here. I'd argue that it's across the board in Orange County, having lived in a variety of places around here. But yeah, I think it's definitely a big thing where you have someone that walks into a room that is dressed differently or wearing something differently or wearing even their hair, painted nails, or whatever, and it brings judgment, it brings remarks and slurs and so on and so forth. Where does that come from, you think?
I think a lot of it definitely has to do with where we're at because we are in a more conservative area. And then also I think like parents have a lot to do with it because I mean, children are raised by their parents, they learn from their parents. So until they sort of break out of that mold and that cycle, they're going to continue to do like what they've learned all their lives. And if we're living in a more conservative area where the people who move here and live here tend to be within that demographic, um, then the kids who are being raised by them are going to think the same things because that's all they've known. Um, so until they sort of branch out and research and look for themselves and look within themselves, it's gonna be that way. There's gonna be judgment and there's gonna be, you know, people who are just like that.
Yeah, it's all, you know, product of your environment. And I don't think the school has enough support for, you know, any kind of other like marginalized communities, such as like, you know, the queer community. I just don't feel like there's any like thing at all, like no support system or community that exists within the school. Because I think people are just thinking like, what's the point? Like if we're gonna get harassed and stuff like that, what's the point in starting a club?
Yeah,
So it's just there's nothing.
There is a club, right? Isn't there a club on campus? It's just not like
and then they also did that thing throughout the week where it was like every day was like, I think it was like by Friday or something like that. And I remember that happening and I was like, oh, this is something that's cool. This is something that's inclusive. And a lot of people on the campus, like even the people that I knew and considered friends, were just like, you know, making fun of it, taking down the posters, um, just making it an issue when it didn't need to be. And I think that's one of the reasons why people have such a hard time expressing themselves is people are so quick to judgment and so quick to see something like that and say, you know, this is not something I believe in. I'm going to take it down. I'm going to fight back when these are people's beings. These are how people identify and how they perceive themselves, which is extremely important, especially in high school when you're learning about that. So for the school to want to celebrate that, and then for the students that you're seeing every day and trying to connect with every day to be, you know, so violently against it and take it down and make fun of it and make a mockery out of it, it feels terrible.
Yeah.
I
And
remember.
I think,
Go for it, Lorenzo.
I was gonna say, and it sucks for, you know, the school because people who are different, they're not gonna want to stay here. So they leave, and thus there's nobody fighting for change anymore. Because for the people who are targeted and are marginalized, they like, we don't want to live in Orange County because it's of the environment and the culture. So everyone leaves and goes to, you know, cities or areas that are more accepting. So then there's no one left to fight because it's so difficult to stay here, which sucks. It's kind of like just like a cycle of, and I think that change needs to happen more on like a higher level. Like I remember what you were doing in your class, like teaching about like non-binary identities and stuff like that, and like parents were freaking out, but that needs to happen, especially in like freshman teachers, like right at the beginning of high school. So starting change then. I think it needs to, like the teachers need to bring it on themselves to fight for change and not just let it go like under the radar and worry about like what the parents will think. I think there needs to be like a responsibility to fight for that kind of change and not put it on the students.
That's a great point. I was going to chime in a little bit earlier. I remember a handful of years ago when we started having Lavender Week, which is meant to celebrate the LGBTQ plus community. And I think it was the week after, you know, we have a lot of weeks of school and we have 1 week that we, you know, try to gear towards Lavender Week and so on and so forth in that community. And over the week after that, some kids walked into my classroom and they said, they're wearing white t-shirts and they said, hey, it's White Week now. They got to have Lavender Week. We're going to have White Week. And I remember just sitting there like going, I couldn't believe how the message of the previous week and all the things that I know Profe had headlined and like just was trying to do a lot of stuff to help educate people. I just couldn't believe how poorly that message was missed by a handful of kids where they thought, like you were saying, I remember kids tearing down signs and stuff and so on and so forth. But to see kids walk into school, and it wasn't a large community of them, but it was enough kids to go, this is a problem where we're trying to put forth this idea where we need to be inclusive and everybody matters and so on and so forth. And then the Monday after that, to have kids come in making fun of that is just, I almost threw up because I just felt so bad as you both said, for those who've been marginalized, not to, I mean, you spend 5 days of school trying to be inclusive and be educational, and to have it shoved back down your throat by people like that. I felt horrible for those kids that were in my class that were going through that, and friends of mine that, I don't know. So I'm with you 100%. I know there's people that are trying to move forward on campus and whatnot. But you're right. More needs to be done for sure. It's just, yeah, I don't know. I don't have enough time to talk about my feelings on all this stuff today too, but it's tough. I mean, you guys were earlier saying too, like talking about, comfortability. Like, do you feel now that you've exited high school and you're in college, do you feel more comfortable in your skin?
Yes.
For sure. Yes.
What's different?
No more high school.
Yeah, I mean, high school, yeah, like we were saying, it's like there's very specific groups that you are associated with. People automatically sign you a label. In college, it's not like that. People don't say, like, oh, they're this person, they belong in this group. They listen to this music, they belong to this group. It's not really like that in college. You can sort of just like be interested in the things you're interested in and identify the way you want to, dress the way you want to, and people just say as long as it's not hurting anybody or offensive to any other community, like go for it. Like, and especially I think the school I'm going to, San Francisco State, it's a very open-minded school and open-minded community. Um, so sort of having that and having like the support from the campus and saying like, emailing us saying like, if you're part of this community, like, we're here to help you. We're here to, aid you in whatever you need, or join this club, or, in different dorms they have like, the rainbow dorms where it's like the, people who identify with the LGBTQ community can go in those dorms, and they have a lot of safe spaces for these people, and they don't tolerate um, violence towards those communities at all.
That's awesome. Go for it, Lorenzo.
Oh, I just pretty much have the same thoughts. And yeah, I don't give it like, I'll talk about like my identity and, my gender and who I am like in, college Zoom classes without even like thinking about it. I just don't feel that same pressure or fear. So, and I haven't even been in person, so I don't know what like triggered it, but I guess like, taking more interesting classes, like if I'm taking a class that's like a few of the classes I've taken is like a woman and gender studies class, and then like a romance and erotica class. So it's just like, I don't know, when it's outside of that regular rigid school curriculum, I think more, people take classes that they're passionate about. And when you're in that group of people who all want to be there, I feel like no one's gonna harass other people. Not saying like never, but feels like people are just focused and are glad to be with a group of like-minded people than just people you're kind of just like shoved in with and just like stay quiet and do your work so you don't attract any attention.
Mm-hmm.
I gotcha. Do you feel like people want to learn more about gender identity and so on and so forth, and they just don't have the means to it? Or do they just not care to learn about it? And I ask that because whenever, like you mentioned, Lorenzo, I've been teaching a unit called Language, Gender, and Culture for the last 7 years, I think. And it's funny because there are parents that are surprised to know that it's curriculum written by Cal State schools. It's not like I'm just pulling this stuff out of my butt and doing it because I want to. It's part of our curriculum, and it was written by college professors. But at the same time, what is always cool about that unit, for me at least, I try to do it at a time during the year when kids have gotten to know me, and they know that I'm not a preachy kind of teacher. I'm just someone who's going to put stuff out there and we can discuss it. But I have been really impressed by a handful of kids, and obviously I've got about 90 every year, but there's a handful of kids out there that truly do find interest in this. And once they have a chance to hear about a story or they get some insight into something, they could change their mind. They become pretty open-minded to at least listening in and thinking about stuff. And we had some cool conversations this year in class about it with some kids. But I do feel like there are kids, at least that come through my class, that do seem pretty interested to learn about it. They just don't really know where to go to learn more about it. Do you get that same sense that people that you meet, obviously you've mentioned in high school when you were here last year and the previous 4 years overall, you weren't really getting that same sense, but as you've gotten older and you've exited high school and such, do you find that in college there are more people that seem interested in learning more about things they don't know?
I think so. I think it's more of like people are more willing to explore because like Lorenzo was saying, in college you take classes that you're passionate about or that you're interested in. But in high school it's sort of a set curriculum. So I think when people have that choice, they're gonna seek it out more.
Yeah. And yeah, I feel like it's not like people just like, I think people do shut it out because of not knowing about it. Because when you're taught for, the 15 years before high school of like, this is how it is, this is, male and female, like this is just how the world is in every single way. I think when you get, confronted with, the truth that there's other things, that there's other identities and stuff like that, there is just a block against it because you're like, no, because I've been taught this way for 15 years. We all are, because that's just the norm. So I feel like it is, yeah, people just don't know where to start and don't know how to confront it because it does go against what we're taught, by society for so much of our lives. And going on to college, I feel like people are more willing to learn. Like people ask questions about gender that, that I've thought about a lot, but I guess aren't thought about by, normal, or not normal, but most, cisgendered people who aren't trans or non-binary. And yeah, they ask like genuinely, not mocking or saying it's wrong, just asking questions and then saying, okay, thank you. So I feel like that does exist in college more. And I wish it was more prevalent in high school.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, in college, like the first day I ever took like a college course, it was the first semester, and every teacher asked like, "What are your pronouns?" And I think, and the teachers put their pronouns too. So I think it's something that is more normalized in college because it's like it's not assumed that you're cis, which I think is something really important because if people assume it, it's going to be really difficult to sort of express that part of yourself. I think in college, it definitely helps that the teachers are so receptive and and want to share that part of themselves, and it's not frowned upon or thought that you have to keep it a secret. Because we're in college, we're all adults. At a certain point, it's like you can't just like hide these things from people. So I think, um, like having people share their pronouns, even if they are cis, in class, it really helps because it makes you feel like, you aren't standing out. You aren't singled out because if people identify as a woman and they say, "Oh, my pronouns are she, her," and goes down the line and everyone's sharing their pronouns, those people who aren't cis or identify, with the pronouns they, them, they feel more open to sharing it because, everyone else is sharing as well. So I think that's really helpful too, to not single people out.
That's super cool. One of my favorite stories that I get to tell during that unit is about this girl, born male, transitioned to female, and she was born as an identical twin. And it's a book called Becoming Nicole. And I know I got into this because, and became more interested when I learned I had a trans student handful of years ago. And so Miss Parmalee recommended that book to me, and reading about her and sharing, she identified, or she prefers she her pronouns as a trans woman. And it's really interesting to watch the kids' reactions because, as you said, Lorenzo, for 15 years or so, you're taught that it's male and female, and that's what it is. And when you ask kids to dive into why that is, they just go, I don't know, that's all I've ever been told before. And so sharing the story and showing photos and such, talking about how she's an identical twin, she was born an identical twin brother, and her brother is straight and all that stuff, is really cool to see minds begin to bend a little bit and start to question things. Because I've had, we had some cool conversations this school year for sure about that. We have it every year because kids begin to feel comfortable just asking things. It's like you said, Kinsey, there's people that start doing certain things, like even just speaking about their pronouns, that allows other people to start to do the same kind of thing. And so I feel like sometimes when we talk about this in class, it opens Pandora's box to these other questions about what kids have had for a long time. They just never knew where to ask it or how to ask it. And so I'd love to know from your points of view, if someone's listening to this right now and just going, I want to learn more, but I have no idea where to turn for any of this stuff. What would you say to them?
I mean, just doing their own research and going to those communities, asking people who are part of the community what they can do to help, what they can do to learn, to make it easier for people. I think that's really important to go, to the source. So asking people like, how can I refer to you, or like tell me more about how you identify or your pronouns. That's a really good way to educate because those people have firsthand experience. They feel all these things, they identify this certain way. So I think, going to members of the community and seeking that out is really important.
Yeah, just like, the internet, I feel like just researching like, trans authors, trans podcasters, or just going on YouTube, I feel there is, I think, a lot more change now of the community being more, public, being more mainstream. So there is a lot of resistance, but I think there is so much good material just by looking up, the gender binary, like different identities, because there are just so many, and it's not a simple, there's no set, like just because there are many people who are trans doesn't mean every single person has a similar view of transness or their or gender identity or the binary. So I feel like just opening yourself up, having an open mind, and just researching.
And let me ask you this too, based on what you're just talking about, how many gender identities there are. I know when we go through, there's an article that we read that the New York Times published a while ago, or maybe like 5 years ago or so, where it says upwards of 50 gender identities. And I know every time that we go through it, a lot of my kids are like, 50, like, how am I supposed to remember this kind of stuff? Like, how is this going to work? Like, what would you, like, for someone that has that curiosity, because it happens every year in my classes. I know it happens to kids that I meet just outside of school and adults I meet outside of school and whatever. But could you maybe help people understand, like, why there are so many possibly?
I feel like people are just restricted no matter what the label is. And like, I like the term gender queer for myself because it is just very open and it's not like a set thing, but even that is a label to some extent. So I feel everyone's trying to find who they are and finding the closest possible term to, showing themselves. Because obviously you can't describe yourself in a word. That's a label. But everyone's trying to find themselves, and they'll, invent new identities that suit them, and other people will identify with that as well. Yeah, I feel like, and with like you said, like how it comes off as confusing to a lot of people, I think that goes back to what Kinsey said of you just have to ask.
Yeah.
And not like point it out, like really make it a big thing, when you're like friends with a trans person, like just asking once and just accepting whatever they say and not having a negative reaction of saying that you need to have that identity. Why can't you have a simpler one that's more common, to say okay and just acceptance.
Yeah. Just like sort of just like like making it like a normal thing, because a lot of the time people assume that, you know, being cis and identifying with the binary is like, okay, that's the easy one. That's the one that everyone is. But instead, I think it's important to go about it in a way where it's like, well, everything is normal, and people are gonna identify a certain way. And instead of sort of assuming like, oh, they're different because of that, just say, oh, that's just an aspect of their personality that they feel comfortable with.
That's such good insight, because I should have told them the same thing. I'm just like, look, it isn't like you have to memorize this stuff. It's not gonna be on a test tomorrow. It's more so just you meet somebody and you want to learn about them. You know, I mean, do you think that labels are necessary in society? Do you think that we need them in a certain way, or is society better off without them? Like, where do you come out on that?
Just less of like a pressure about them, because I feel like I don't like pronouns. Like I don't like how, they're needed, or you'll often be mistaken for something you're not, and just people start calling you he or she, even if you don't identify with that. But I feel like it is, I guess, just necessary in language.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, for me personally, labels aren't necessarily something that are important to me. I don't really care either way. It's just something that comes with our society. But for some people, labels are really important to identify themselves. Some people who are trans say, I want my pronouns to be she, her, or I want them to be he, him. Those are my labels and those are important to me. I keep those close to my heart. So it's really important to identify those labels too, and make sure that they're heard, because for them, identifying with this binary gender is super important to them, because, everyone who is trans or gender nonconforming, of course they want to pass. Of course they want to be accepted. Of course they want their identity to be known and accepted and validated. So for those people who do see labels as very important to them, I think that's a really important thing to acknowledge too.
Yeah, and that's something that's also a big thing in the community of, where you fall in that. Like some, trans people will be very open with their transness and be very, like, that's part of their identity, is that they are trans and want to be seen that way. And there are others who don't, who just want to be seen as who they are, and might not, want to be seen as trans. They just want to be seen as who they are. And so that's, that varies from, like what I was saying before, it just varies from person to person. But I think, how you want to feel validated. And yeah, and I think for people who, again, have a trans friend or something, to not make it a big deal, or not go out of your way, even if you think you're doing a positive thing by like verbally validating them, it could just make them feel different. Like, you have to point out my identity every time we hang out together, even if it's in a positive way.
Mhm.
Why can't you just like accept me?
Yeah. Because, like, I think although that is, like, coming at it in a positive way, in a supportive way, I think a lot of the time, like, I think that, like, attempt to be, like, woke or, like, just to make sure, like, "Oh, you're valid," and it's like, "Okay, yes, I know I'm valid. Like, can you just sort of acknowledge it and move on? This is how I am. It's not, like, my entire being," you know? I think it's just important to accept it and normalize it and make people feel safe and not stand out.
Oh,
Like,
I
a
love
gender identity is not your whole identity. It's just a small part of it. So it's, yeah.
For more episodes of The Tripod, check out sctripod.com.